Dạ, bây giờ chúng con kính thỉnh sư cô Thiên Tuệ giúp thông dịch sang tiếng Anh. Xin kính mời sư cô.
Thank you, host. So today is Friday, December 25th, 2020. The Dharma talk at 7:30 p.m. Let's start by reciting Namo Tassa 3 times. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Bhutang saranang gacchami, dhammang saranang gacchami, sanghang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami, tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami, tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dhamma. I take refuge in the Sangha. The first time, the second time, and the third time. Now is the taking the 8 precepts. The first precept, I try to abstain from taking life. The second precept, I try to abstain from taking what is not given. The third precept is trying to abstain from sexual practices. The fourth precept is trying to abstain from false speeches. The fifth precept is trying to abstain from taking intoxicants that can cause carelessness and forgetfulness. The sixth precept is trying to abstain from eating at the wrong times, mainly from noon until dawn the next day. The seventh precept is trying to abstain from dancing, singing, listening to music, watching show, wearing garlands, perfumes, ointments, etc. And the eighth precept is trying to abstain from staying or lying on high and luxurious beds and seats. So that is the procedures for taking refuge in the triple gem, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, as well as taking the eighth precept. Moving on to the Dhamma talk. Today, Sarachi started the talk by talking about the colors of the flags that related to the virtues of the Buddha. So recently, yesterday, here at Mahasatipatthana Meditation Center, we raised 2 flags. One is the American flags and the other is the Buddhist flags. And when a person look at the flags, you can see different colors of, on the Buddhist flags. And each colors represent the paramis or the perfection that the Buddha fulfill in order to be, the Bodhisattva fulfill in order to become the Buddha. So when a person wish to become a Buddha or a Samma Sambuddha, there's in general, there's 10 different kinds of paramis. And in terms of the level, there are 3 different levels: the lower level, the middle levels, and the highest level. So when a person wish to become a Samma Sambuddha, the person have to fulfill all 10 paramis to the highest level. So if there is 10 paramis and the 3 levels, so the person have to fulfill all 30 or from a lower to the middle and to the highest level in order to become a Samma Sambuddha. So it's very, very hard, and it's very, very difficult to fulfill all these 10 paramis to the highest level of perfection. So in this world, or in this world cycle, there's only 5 Buddhas. It has been the 4 Buddha. Gautama Buddha was the 4th Buddha, and there would be a future Buddha. Because it's so hard and it's so rare, so that's why it's very hard for a person to become a Samma Sambuddha. And it's also, because of that, it's also very rare, and it's very difficult for human being or sentient beings or a human being like us to be able to born in the time of the Buddha, as well as to listen to the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, and to follow as well as applying the Dhamma. So now Sarajit continue to tell a story about the past life of a Buddha to show us how difficult it is to fulfill a parami. So as mentioned earlier, there are 3 different levels of parami, of fulfillment. First is the low level, the middle level, and the highest level. So the story that Sarajit shared was the middle level, where the Bodhisattva dana or give away his eyes in order to fulfill his paramis. So I will try to translate the story into English as much as I could. So the name of the story is Chivi Jataka, and it's talking about the dana or the charities or giving away of the eyes. And this is related to the blue colors on the flags. So once upon a time, when the Buddha was staying at the Jetawada garden in the Savatthi city, and the disciple of the Buddha were talking about this king Pasenadi Kosala was doing dana, giving charity. Sometimes I use danas mean charity or giving away, doing dana for entire 7 days straight. And because of this occasions, the Buddha were telling his disciple that, dear Bhikkhu, back in the days, there was a king, or there was a person that every day that would give out a 600,000 kahabana, which is the units of Indian money back in the day, in order to give dana, in order to give charity. Even that person was not happy or was not satisfied with all these material or this money dana outside of the body. That person thought that if you trying to give away or you dana the most valuable things that you have, then the result or the consequences, you also will be able to receive what is most valuable to you. And because of thinking that way, the person think that whatever that the parts of your body that would be very valuable to a person, or even the life of the person, is the most valuable thing to a person. So therefore, if there's a person or anyone would like to dana, to give away any parts of the body, and that person would be happy to give away any parts of the body. So because of the Buddha were telling that to the disciple of the Buddha was asking him, oh, please, Lord Buddha, could you please talk about, or could you please tell us about that Sky person? And this is the stories of the Chivi Jataka. So back in the day, when the Bodhisattva were practicing Dana Barami, and he was born as a prince of the king in the Sivi kingdom. And this kingdom has the capital is Aritabura. And the prince was named was Sivi Kumara. And the Bodhisattva grow up with all kinds of good condition. He was very wise, he was very kind, and he have all these very beautiful virtue. when the king passed away, the crown prince became the king, and the new king ruled the country, CV Ratha, with the Dharma, or with wholesome understanding. So the king built six different camps in order to give away 600,000 kahabana, the money, 6,000, like let's say dollars, $600,000 every day in order to give dana. And on the Uposatha days, or the king would go to each camps in order to give away these dana himself directly. And one time during the Uposatha day, when the CV king went to give danas, and then he contemplated with his happiness and his joys of giving, that all these material things, all this money that he's been giving away, these are only external things. And he wanted to fulfill, he wanted to give more than he could, because he think that this is not as valuable to him as any parts of his body. And because of this thinking, the king vowed that if anybody would like to ask for his heart, he would give away his heart. If anybody would want his eyes, he would give away his eyes. If anyone would want his flesh on his body, he would cut off his flesh or any parts of his body to give away to that person. If anyone want his blood, he would give away his blood. And if anyone want him to become a servant, he will become a servant and to serve that person in happiness. And because of this powerful vow of the CV king, the Sakka, the king of Sakka, the kings of all the deities, Sakka, his seed will becomes very hot, and his seed become heated. So therefore, he wanted to know what's going on in the world that make his seed become very hot and heated. And that's why he realized that, because of this king just making a very, very powerful vow in order to fulfill this dana parami, in order to become a Sammasambuddha. And in order to test the king, the Sakka, the king of the deities, came down to the world, and he pretended to be a blind person. So this blind person came to the king, and then he was saying that, could you please give me your eye so that I could see? And he only asked for one eye, but then the king was so happy, because he think that, this is a chance for me to fulfill my parami. This is a chance for me to make my vow come true. So therefore, not only he wanted to give one eye away, he agreed to give to the Sakka 2 eyes. So the King CV asked the blind Sakka go back to the palace and ask for the doctor to come and to take out 2 of his eyes. But then, because of the royal doctor did not use the knife to cut out his eye, he's actually used this kind of herbal medicine that use out from the blue lotus. And then he mixed these into this powder, and he put it on the eyes of the king. So each time the powder was applied onto the eyes of the king, the eye would come out a little bit outside of out to the eye socket, and become is easier to remove. And it was very, very painful each time when the royal doctor applied like that. And because it was so painful, the doctors always ask the king, dear king, would you like me to stop? Because I can stop the process, and you don't have to endure all this pain. But every time that the doctor asked the king, the king always say with happiness and joy, no, please continue. And he did not change his mind. So for the first time, the second time, and the third time, just like that, the royal doctor was able to remove the eyes of the king outside of his eye socket and give it to Sakka, the kings of the deities. And with the power, the king of the deity were able to put the eyes into the eyes of the Bodhisattva into his body, and he would be able to see. And from because the first eye he gave away was the right eye, so the right eye gave to the Sakka, and with his left eye he could see that the Sakka was very happy, able to see with his eye. So he made this announcement: Mama ito akito satta gunena sahasa gunena satta sahasa gunena sabba nyuta nanya nakimewa biyaratam tasame idam bacheyo hotu. So the translation for that Pali was, there's only the eyes of wisdom of the Samma Sambuddha is the most valuable thing. Only that is more valuable 100 times, 1,000 times, 100,000 times than the eyes, this mundane, this conventional, this flesh eye that I gave away. May the merits from my dana would be the condition for me to become the Samma Sambuddha in the future. So why seeing his eyes like that? The king was so happy, and he makes the vows, and he wished that by his merits he would become a Samma Sambuddha, because for him the eyes of wisdom is so much more valuable than the flesh eyes that he gave away. And just like that, the royal doctor continued to use the medicine to take away his left eye, and now both of the eyes was given away, and the King Sivi became completely blind. And now the Sakka have two of the eyes, and then after that he returned back to the heaven realms. So one time, after be completely blind, the king went to the garden, and he thought that now I became completely blind. It's not suitable for me to continue to rule the kingdom. So maybe it's better for me to give away my throne to the cabinet or to the royal guard, so that I can just go back and practice as an ascetic. So while thinking that way in the royal garden, the Sakka, the kings of all the deities, heard his thought and realized that, and he was very happy that King Sivi was be able to fulfill his barami and fulfill his vow. So therefore, King Sakka came down from the heaven and gave back two eyes to the King Sivi. And with this new eyes, it was say that his new eye was just like the Deva eye. Not only he would see through all the wall, see through all the tower, see through all the mountain, he would be able to see as far as 100 miles in the way. So with the eyes, with the new eyes, the king came back to the palace and became kings again. And then after that, he ruled the country with the Dharma, with the right Dharma. So he continued to give away to fulfill his barami, dana, barami, the perfection. And then he teach his citizen to keep the 5 precepts at least in order to have a happy life. And then after that, he's also encouraged them to practice, observe Uposatha Sila, which is the 8 precept during the Uposatha day. And every 2 weeks, during the Uposatha day, King Sivi would give the Dharma talk to not only his cabinet, his guards in the palace, but he's also give the Dharma talk to the citizen of Siviratha. And because of that, all these people follow his teachings, follow the right Dharma, keep the precept, and then they would be born into the heaven realms after they pass away. So based on this story, Sivi Jataka, what's the related roles are. So nowadays, during the Buddha time, Sakka, the king of Odesi, became the venerable Anuruddha, and the royal doctor Sivika nowadays during the Buddha time was the venerable Ananda, and all these people in his cabinets, all the citizens in the cities of Sivirata become his four different sanghas: bhikkhu, bhikkhuni, uposaka, and uposika, the lay devotees, the male lay devotees, and the female lay devotee. And the bodhisattva, CV at that time, now is the Buddha Gautama. So that is the story that Sarachi told about the Dana Barami in the middle level only. And you could see that just only in the middle level, it was so hard to give out a part of your body. And he was be able to give out 2 of his eyes in order to fulfill his Barami, because for him, the ultimate wisdom, the liberation, the wisdom that realized the Four Noble Truths, it was so much more valuable compared to the eyes of a mundane person. So now, because of that, when we look at the flag, we can see that each color is representing each different paramis or different cultivations, different donations or dana that the Buddha cultivated in order to fulfill his barami. And when we see like that, we realize or we understand how powerful or how excellent the Buddha was. And then when we remember the virtue of Buddha like that, we'll be able to develop faith in order to practice his teachings better. And why do we have to practice his teaching? Because the Buddha was very, very kind. Not only he realized the Four Noble Truths for himself, he wanted to help us realize the Four Noble Truths the same way he did. Just like all the citizens in his country, when they follow him as when he was a king, they listen to his teaching, they follow his dharma, and because of that, now when the Buddha Gautama, when the Bodhisattva became the Buddha Gautama, all these citizens became his disciple, the bhikkhu, bhikkhunis, lay female as well as male devotee. They also practice his teaching and realize the Four Noble Truths. So Sarachi said that for us to be here nowadays, in order to still be able to be born as a human being and to be able to listen or hear the teachings of Gautama Buddha, the present Buddha, and to practice his teaching, this means that maybe in our past lifetime, we already ones that have been following the teachings or following the Dharma that's been taught by the Bodhisattva. It's just that because our barami was not fulfilled, is not enough for us to fulfill in order to realize the Four Noble Truths yet. So therefore, we still have to practice. And he say that in terms of the baramis, there's 3 different levels: the lower level, the middle level, and the highest level. So it's very hard to fulfill even to the middle level, because based on the story, we can see that it's very difficult, let alone the highest level. So like us, what we're trying to do is we're trying to fulfill the low level so that we can still realize the Four Noble Truths. So he gave the example that just like the banana trunk, or I'm sorry, the banana, even at first when the banana was ripe, it's a good banana, it's very big and it's very ripened. And then slowly when the banana tree become very, very old, then they give out the banana fruit is not as good as the first time when it was still young. Just like that, it has been 2,500 years and more during into this Buddha Sasana. So therefore, right now, maybe we do not, our barami was not as good as they used to be before, where during the Buddha time. But if we still trying hard to practice, then we still be able to fulfill our baramis and then still be able to realize the Four Noble Truths that the Buddha taught. So what can we do? What can we do in order to realize the Four Noble Truths? We have to follow the Buddha teachings. And the Buddha teachings is nothing but Sila, Samadhis, and Panya. Sila is morality, precept, is the foundation. Without a foundation, you cannot build anything. So that's why at every single Dharma talk, we always start with observing or taking the precept, because with the precept, we have to purify our bodily action as well as verbally action. And when our bodily as well verbally actions are purified, it's easier for us to train the mind. So when we train the mind, we practice vipassana meditation. And when we practice vipassana meditations like that, concentration will be developed, samadhi. And with concentration, panya, wisdom will arise. And with this panya, this wisdom, that means that we will be able to realize things at how they or see things as they really are. And when it's come to sila, why is it so important? And why is it that every time when we listen to the Dharma talk, we always asking for sila and taking the precepts again? Because it's so easy to break sila. It's so easy to break the precepts, especially when it's come to verbally action. It's so easy for you to speak unmindfully so that the sila is not pure. And just like that, every time we always ask for sila, because when you purify your sila, you're trying to restrain yourself from committing bodily unwholesome action, bodily as well as verbally. And at that very moment, when your sila is purified, then you can start practicing meditation again, or continue to practice meditation. And it doesn't matter if you break your sila yesterday or you just break your sila 10 minutes ago or 20 minutes ago, it's all already in the past. When you ask to purify your sila are purified at the present moment, and you start practicing meditation at that very moment onward. Therefore, it's easier for your mind to develop concentration, and with the concentration, the wisdom would be able to arise. And when a person practicing vipassana meditation, what is it that we are trying to develop? We want to understand what is going on in the body and what is going in the mind. The bodies and the mind are the objects of vipassana meditation. So when it's come to the body, we understand that this body is made out of the four major elements, or we call it rupa, the material qualities. And these four major elements, each element have its own characteristics as well as intrinsic nature. So when a person practicing vipassana meditation, the person wants to see the manifestations of each element through the body. So for example, when a person see risings, falling of the abdomen, then you can see there is movement, vibration, and extension. These are the manifestations of the wind element. So when we pay attention, we do not pay attention to the concept of the abdomen, but we want to pay attention to the ultimate reality, the moving, the vibration, because from that we realize that this is the manifestations of the wind element. Just like that, when a person see that, oh, there is heat or coldness that happening or manifested in the body, then you contemplate heat or coldness, and that are the manifestations of the fire element, the temperatures of the body. And then when it's come to hardness or softness, and that is the manifestations of the earth element. So when the person contemplate like that, the person have to have a samadhi, concentration. And with concentration, the person would be able to penetrate through the concept of the flesh and bone of the body, but understand their ultimate reality. And that is the body. What about the mind? The mind also have its own characteristic. And the functions of the mind is only knowing the objects or cognize the objects. And when a person practicing meditation, we're trying to contemplate, or we're trying to observe, be mindful of what is going on in the body. Excuse me. What's going on in the body as well as what's going on in the mind at the present moment. And normally when a person does not know how to train our mind, the mind is always conditioned with thinking. We're either thinking about the past or we're thinking about the future. And normally when we think about the past, all this sorrow, all this remorse, all this regret would arise in the mind. And when we come to think about the futures, all this worriness and then all these depression would come into the mind. And the mind always be conditioned in the past or the future. The mind does not know how to stay at the present moment. So when we practice, we're trying to bring the mind back into the body so that the mind can stay in the body at the present moment. And when it's come to the food of the mind, we all know that in order for the person to survive, we have to eat. We eat every day to fuel our body. and without food we will die. And just like that, there's others, food for the mind. For example, contact is food for the mind, or in another word is the mind lives through this contact. What does it mean, contact? When the eye seeing the external object, the consciousness happening, that is where the mind lives. And when the ear hearing an external sound, that's hearing consciousness arise, that is where the mind stay in the ear. So on with feeling, touching, smelling, tasting, and so on. So these are 5 sense doors that we have on our body. Whenever there's a contact between the internal organs as to the external contact object, internal organs into external object, then that's where the mind, the consciousness arise from hearing, seeing, tasting, touchings, and so on. And that is where the food of the mind, or where the mind actually live. So when a person know how to direct the mind back into the body, whenever there's a contact between the internal organs or internal sense with the external object, that's where the mind should be live right there, contemplating, mindful, and know what is going on in the body or what's going on in the mind at the present moment. And Sayagyi reminds us that when we forget about that, when there is no mindfulness, when there is no awareness, when the mind does not stay in the body at the present moment, so we see but we don't know what it is. We see, we hear, we eat, and we do all kind of things, but we're not aware of everything that's going on. That is considered as not living, because we forget that we did not, the mind does not know that it's actually living at that present moment. So therefore it is not to get, it's not stay within the body, and that time the mind is actually be carried away or be taken away by delusions, by hatred, and by greed. And these are Sayagyi considered like Amara, or the devil. So when the mind is not with the body, with the present moment, living at the present moment, knowing what's going on in the body, knowing what's going on in the mind, then the mind would be conditioned or be taken away by either delusion, either greed, or either hatred. And all these things are the one that actually bring us, are the cause that take us out into the samsara, the cycle of death and rebirth. So if we are letting our mind just continue to live that way, or to die, to not live that way, just be able to be followed by delusions, angers, and hatred, then our mind is not aware, and that is considered a forget, and that is considered a dying mind. So how to not die is to remember to live in the body, to remember to live in the mind. And that's why in the Sutta, Mahasatipatthana Sutta, the Buddha taught us 4 ways, or the 4 foundations of mindfulness, so that we can direct the mind to live. So the first one is to live in the body. The second is to live with the feeling. The third is to live with the mind. And the third is to live with the Dhamma. In another word, that we have to, that there are 4 foundations of mindfulness, of the contemplations of the body in the body, contemplations of the feelings in the feeling, contemplations of the minds in the mind, and contemplations of the dhammas in the dhamma. So when we know how to direct the mind back into this body and know how to contemplate within these 4 foundations, the mind is always with the body, the mind is always stay at the present moment, and that way the mind is always live and not be conditioned by past or future, or be diluted by delusions, angers, or hatred. And again, when we talked about these 4 foundations of mindfulness, then we have to remember that that's just the division for us to easier to contemplate. But when it's come to the objects of meditation, if we take in 2 objects, there's only bodies and mind. And if we take in as if we divide these bodies and mind into a smaller sector, then there's this body, and the mind can divide it into feeling, volitions, perceptions, as well as consciousness. So whatever the way that the Buddha taught, he trying to teach the Dhamma in as much detail as possible, so that he would cover all ground, so all his listeners and the audience would understand and be able to practice accordingly. So when a person practicing sitting meditation, then there's all these. First of all, we use rising, falling up the abdomen as the main objects, and during sitting, there's all these pain would arise in the body. So when the pains arise in the body, we do not want to identify this pain as in like my legs is painful, my hands is painful, etc. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that wherever the pains arise, we only notice pains at that very spot and not identifying anything. We just want to notice and be aware of the sensations and of the feelings of that pain at that moment. And if there is thinkings arising in the mind, we do not want to say, oh, there's I think so much, or identify ourselves with all this thinking. Thinking is only just an activities of the mind. So when thinkings arising or imaginations or planning happening, all we have to do is just notice it and contemplate that thinkings at thinking. And then after that, we go back to the risings and falling. So again, Sayagyi say that when a person practice vipassana meditation, normally at the beginner, most of yogi experience a lot of pains and a lot of suffering, and that is very normal. And in fact, that is a good sign, because the first noble truth that the Buddha taught is the truth of suffering. When a person practice vipassana meditation, not only we understand the truth of suffering in terms of in the eyes of the meditation, we also see that first of all, when we're born as a human being, being born is suffering. Aging is suffering. Sickness is suffering. And when we about to pass away, dying is also suffering. And when we're practicing vipassana meditation, there's all these pains arising. And these pains is arising in our body, it's just because of the changings of the phenomena from one from one moment to another. And because of these forever changing, this conditioned phenomenon that changing like that, so therefore this pains arise. And when we observe this pain like that, we can see that the pains come, it exists and it passes away. The pains arise, exists and passes away every single moment. And just like that, we can see that we actually are dying in every single moment. All these phenomena, even the pain is come and it passes away. It does not stay and nothing stay. And that is understanding or seeing the how things really are. So, and if we see all this, and then when the wisdom becomes ripened, then we would get, the mind would get to the stage where there is no pain, there is no sickness, there is no aging, and there's no death. And that is the state of the ultimate liberations or nibbana. So nibbana can be achieved, and and if a person just ardently, wholeheartedly follow the teachings of the Buddha, applying the teachings of the Buddha, and the Buddha guarantee that this is the only way that will be able to bring the yogi or bring the practitioner out of limitation, sorrow, and into the ultimate liberations of nibbana. And at the end of the talk, Sayagyi encouraged us that the Buddha was very compassionate. He not only realized the truth, he also taught us the way in order to follow him, in order to realize the truth the same way he did. And right now, it's been 2,500 years and more into the Dharma. And the Dharma of Gautama Buddha were predicted to last up to 5,000 years. So right now, we're in the middle way. So we trying to practice hard in order to get on the ship and to cross over to the other shore, so that we will not waste our time to be born as a human being and be able to know the Dharma and listening to the Dharma of the Gautama Buddha. And that's all I have for today's summary of the translation. Thank you so much for listening. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Merry Christmas, everybody.